Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We want to talk about storytelling tonight, and my guest is Miranda O'Connor. She is the co-founder and producer of an organization called The Art of Storytelling. She is an entrepreneur, a consultant, and a co-founder of The Art of Storytelling, and they specialize in helping organizations tell their story and build their brand through real, authentic, natural video storytelling. And she's got experience producing hundreds of videos, and you've got really quite an interesting background that we might touch on as well, both from a where you come from standpoint and some of your entrepreneurial endeavors in the past. Welcome to the show, Miranda.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian.
So tell me, how did you get into wanting to be a storyteller?
So I would say that I never had any intention to become a storyteller. My husband, and he's also my business partner, we started doing photography and video. So there was a long entrepreneurial journey that led to video work and photography. And the type of video work that we really specialize in right now that brings us our greatest joy is being able to help businesses connect with their audience through real and authentic video stories. So instead of just advertising that type of marketing like TV commercials, because we did TV commercials for a long time, and we found that they're not real. They're not as real as the company is, or as the people really are in the company. You know, it's always scripted. It comes from an ad agency. But when we got the opportunities to work directly with clients and help them talk about their stories and their business and what's really important to them, like their vision and their mission and what they think is unique about themselves, that's when we got really interested in focusing on this type of video work.
So how do you figure out your vision, mission, and what's unique about yourself, and then tell it in a story? How do you do that?
Yeah, so I mean, there are lots of consultants who are very specific in helping businesses with, writing their mission and their vision. We don't really go into that as much, but we come in when a company says, I want to put my authentic self out there. I want to put my actual experience and what makes me unique and different. And I want to talk about that. And we come in and we do a very simple, very easy to do process where we set up a variety of questions that are always prompting questions. So we help the clients tell their story themselves. So it's very real, it's very authentic. Of course, there's a lot of background work that we do. We spend lots of time talking to the client about, what makes you different and unique, and why do you differentiate yourself over someone else, and it could be things that are fairly comparable, like accountants, right? Accountants are accountants, but what makes one of them a bit different and unique and special? You get that when you actually talk to the founder or, the business owner, the managers, the employees, the clients, and even just the community that they operate in, because people connect with people. They don't buy products just because they need the product. They choose who they're going to get this product or service from based on if they like them and if they trust them.
People connect with people. I think that that's very true. And they buy from people, not just the product attribute. So you say there's prompting questions that help you get to the authentic person. What are some of those prompting questions? Can you share?
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes it's very specific. So if, say, a client says, I have to try and think of one. Like we have 3 pillars of community involvement that we support with our funding. So if we want them to say something specific in a soundbite, like you need to name these 3 things, the prompting question would help them get to that, because we don't just sit there and say, okay, tell me all about your business, because people go blank. The questions are too broad. So we make really specific questions. So, if the question is, I want to help people who have specific problems, like say curly hair people, they can't go to normal hairdressers. Normal hairdressers might not be able to cut curly hair. There's these unique things about businesses. And once you start to find those unique things, you can create the prompting questions to help the person say those sentences. They can say it pretty comfortably when they're just, practicing with me. But then when they get in front of the camera, they get really nervous. So I make all of these prompting questions to try and help them remember and just, prompt them into, this is what we want to say in this soundbite. Because we're looking for really short sound bites, right? We're trying to make 3-minute, 5-minute videos. So you can't let people ramble. You can't leave them up to their own self to talk. You have to give them prompting questions.
That's interesting. So I don't do 3-minute sound bites. I do 47 minutes because it's an hour minus commercials.
Yeah.
And I find that, a lot of people don't have time to listen to a full 47 minutes,
Yeah.
but I find that you do have an opportunity to really get to people's authentic self, because you've got that opportunity to ask them numerous questions and really get into who they are and what they're all about during that time period. I actually did interview 3 hairdressers that specialized in curly hair at one point in time. It's ironic that you brought it up. And it was fascinating because what they said is that the vast majority of hairdressing schools in and around Toronto didn't deal with people that had curly hair.
Correct.
And that they had to actually launch their own school that specialized in people that had curly hair. And they said it was actually racism, that people that had very curly hair weren't adequately dealt with in the hairdressing schools around Toronto. And I didn't know any of that. So it was really quite fascinating. And that there was real pressure for some females that had very curly hair, typically Black ladies or African Canadians, to straighten their hair and to be inauthentic. And they felt that was wrong, that they shouldn't be forced to be inauthentic, and that they had the right to allow their curly hair to shine on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people with curly hair that straighten their hair, not just people from African descent. And it was very interesting speaking with this hairdresser because, sometimes you go into a project and you think, oh my gosh, it's a hairdresser. What am I going to talk about that's so special about this hairdresser? And then when you spend the time, and honestly, I spend about 45 minutes with my clients as well when I do my interviews. So I get to spend that 45 minutes that you spend talking to them, getting all of the information out of them, but bringing it back so that we get nice short sound bites so we can make the 5-minute video. And when you spend that amount of time, you do get to what's behind this, what's the motivation behind this business. And you get to hear all of those amazing stories that come out about, why have they decided to specialize in curly hair? And why is that such an important story to share with the community?
It's fascinating opportunity that you've got and a business that you've created. So tell me, where do you broadcast these videos? Is these things that people put on their website, or what's the use of the video?
Yeah. So it's very broad, and it's usually a lot of areas that people don't necessarily think of right away. So if I meet someone and they say, okay, you do video, so what? It's on YouTube. So yes, sure, it's on YouTube, but businesses put their videos on their website primarily, their social media second, or sometimes first. And then there's all these other uses. So say trade shows. If you're a company that goes to a trade show, you should have a big screen that has all this information about you going on. So that's one way. When we work with really big organizations, they do a lot of internal communications. And sometimes that is in video as well. There's also, big like digital screens. Photography, you can get photography anywhere, everywhere is for photography. So there's always many different places that video can be used. The storytelling videos, I would say definitely websites and social media. Other types of things like training videos would be like we just did a series that is an online learning platform that's training employees. So there's a lot of internal that you don't see, but there's a lot that you do see that's public.
I really think that the power of videos are, intuitively obvious, but people may not recognize it. I've had a reasonable amount of political involvement and fundraising involvement. Mm-hmm. And when we sent out an email with embedded video, the click rate went up dramatically.
Yes.
So, I think people see emails as efficient, but they don't really convey the message. And I had one person explain that the proof of that is, you think about the incredible use of emojis today, because emojis can express some passion, some emotion. And so we use emojis in texts and emails because the written word, particularly a short text or short email, doesn't really convey any emotion. You need a book or a chapter to really convey in the written word some emotion. But a video can do that incredibly well. And so I think that that's a huge benefit of a video. We got to take a break for some messages. We're going to come back with Miranda O'Connor in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Miranda O'Connor, and we're talking about storytelling. She is the co-founder and producer of an organization called The Art of Storytelling, and they specialize in helping organizations tell their story and build their brand through real, authentic, natural video storytelling. She's produced hundreds of videos. Miranda, you've got an interesting story yourself. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that. So I understand that you've got a Canadian father and a Trinidadian, what's the word? Trinidadian mother. And you grew up in Toronto, but you spent many years in Trinidad, where you actually launched your entrepreneurial experience. Tell me about, an interesting background.
So I was actually born in Montreal. My parents lived in Montreal in, I guess it was like the late 70s. And when I was about 5-6 years old, Montreal wasn't going so great for non-French speaking people. And my parents decided, okay, we need to move. My mom had 2 small kids and she was really having a hard time living in Montreal. And she said, that's it, I'm going back to Trinidad where the weather is warm and my parents are there. So she packed us up. They were doing screen printing, traditional screen printing. She took her screen printing machine with her. They shipped it to Trinidad and they set up shop in my grandparents' garage, and they started printing t-shirts. And so I grew up in Trinidad pretty much from the time I was about 5-6 years old. And when I had to go to university, I came back to Canada. I went to York University and I said, okay, I don't really want to be here. I want to go back to Trinidad again. So I went back, and that's when I was done with university. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had done an environmental studies degree, and in Trinidad in those days, environment wasn't really anything of importance to anybody, so there weren't too many opportunities. And my husband and I started doing small business. We started with graphic design. He's really the creative person and I'm the business manager. So we did graphic design, then we did website design, and it just kept going from there, and the clients kept changing. And, the more that the clients wanted something else, we started to offer different services. It was at the time of the whole digital revolution with digital cameras, and we invested in this super expensive digital camera that was more expensive than what you'd even spend today for a basic camera. And we started doing photography. The photography then morphed into video. And that's kind of how we got to where we are today. We just kept moving with where things were going, where the clients wanted us to go, and then where we wanted to go. We spent many years doing commercial video, like TV commercials, and we just felt like this is not really where it's at. We had some wonderful opportunities working with some big international brands to start to do their corporate social responsibility. And in those days, that was a fairly new thing, especially in Trinidad, right? So we learned a lot about social impact, environmental stories, and the importance of telling these stories about the community and about the business and about how businesses are affecting communities. We were working with big organizations that had foundations. So if we were working with BP, we'd be telling their BP stories about these new platforms and rigs that they were building and all this oil and gas they were finding. But we were also doing the fence line community stories. So those Trinidad is very rural. And a lot of those plants are in rural areas near the beaches and the oceans. So we were doing a lot of those fence line stories, and they were doing a lot of community impact in those fence line communities, supporting them with scholarships, lots of education, lots of financial literacy, small business training and loans. And we were able to do those stories. And that was really interesting because we weren't advertising or selling anything. We were simply getting the real story from the community, getting them to talk about the impact and using that to benefit the company, especially with their reputation.
So I find, what you're talking about really interesting because, you could have branded your company video production, which is what you do. Or maybe it's how you do it, I guess. But it seems that the unique part of what you're providing is this idea of the real story, the authentic story, the
Absolutely.
storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's very different than video production.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And that is how we differentiate ourselves, because you can hire a videographer, you could hire a video studio, or you could hire a team that actually knows how to help you get your story told. And I feel like ad agencies can't do it. I think advertising agencies are just focused on like, what's the ROI? What are we going to sell? What are people going to buy? But, getting to the actual story, I think that's something that's taken us years. It wasn't immediate. My partner would say that when he started to go into the communities and, work with athletes or children, and you create these stories about them that are real, because we are asking the actual real people to tell their story, either the employees or the customers or the community. We're asking them about their real story in their words, right? Because we don't put any words in their mouth. We help them with prompting questions, but they get to tell their story. And when they see, because we give them a really high production value product, when they see how good they look and how good they sound, because there's a lot of editing that goes into it, they feel really proud. And I think that is what draws people to these stories. It's the emotion. And you had mentioned emotion in the first segment. And I thought, yeah, we need to come back to the emotion, because that's really what it is. And when viewers are watching these video stories that are real and true, absolutely 100% real, like there's no AI in this, they start to feel that emotional bonds. Because humans like stories. They remember stories, like the stories that I tell you today, there's going to be things that will jog your memory and say, oh yeah, I remember Miranda. She's that woman from Trinidad who does these stories. It's because you get that emotional connection with someone when you hear them tell their actual story in their own words.
But so many people have their elevator pitch or their practiced little stump speech or whatever it is, and you don't feel like you're getting the authentic real story. So how do you get the authentic real story? What's the secret to your ability to get the authentic real story with emotion?
I think it's making the client comfortable to be able to tell us a little bit more. So when they're not comfortable, they try to memorize something, they write it down, they practice it, they try to learn it, they want to memorize it, or they want to teleprompter it. But making them comfortable, and it's just techniques that we do, we tell them, don't over prepare, don't write everything down, don't try and memorize anything. Let's just do this naturally. And we have a really easy conversation. And we do it in a way that, like, literally it's me and I'm speaking to the person who's telling their story. And we just talk. So it becomes natural, it becomes easy and relaxed. And once they get into that relaxed zone, we just continue with the prompting questions and we help them along and say, can you make that a little bit shorter? Or can you tell me more about this? And then what you have to do is listen for those winning sound bites. Something has to be emotional. You have to have that emotional hook. You have to hear those winning sound bites. And then you know that you've nailed this interview.
I think that I've had the experience of people that have been underprepared and people that are overprepared. And there really is that sort of Goldilocks just right in the middle. People that are overprepared tend to, write it all down, maybe in fact have it on their computer beside them and want to read it. And that's terrible, because then it's not a conversation. It's just them reading their prepared remarks. And then other people that are completely unprepared just go on and ramble, and they don't have an idea about what their message is and what they actually want to say. So I find it really helpful to get people to think about what their message is and what they want to say ahead of time.
Yes.
But then not refer back to that. Because I don't want them to read anything.
No.
And then I think the other secret is you, which is, you providing those questions, those probing questions that you talked about, and then listening really closely, because then you want to ask the follow-on, because it's the vast majority of time, for me at least, it's not the question, and it's not the first follow-on. It's the second or third follow-along question that gets to the real story, the authentic.
Correct.
It's the old attitude that Ted Lasso talked about in regards to being curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you do that? How do you listen so closely?
Well, because I've had, a few different Zoom meetings or in-person meetings, and I've researched the company, so I kind of have an idea of what we're talking about. And the 3-minute stories or 5-minute stories are usually specific to something. So it might be, this is just the about us story, and these are some of the unique things. So I kind of have an idea of what we're going to talk about. If it's something like an employee story, I would do the same thing. I would talk to that employee, find out, some of that background information about what they find is good about where they work. But one of the things is to not let them talk too much during the discovery, because during those discovery conversations, if you have that full conversation in depth for 45 minutes, when you actually come to record, they feel like they've said it already.
And they say it. Oh, as we talked about. Well, you didn't talk about it.
Yes.
On the video.
They feel like they said it already. So the discovery, while you have to know what you're going to talk about and be prepared, you don't want to try and duplicate that conversation in front of the camera.
I agree. I think that thinking about what your message is, thinking about what some of those questions are and what some of the answers are, I think is really helpful, but not writing them all out and not practicing them all out.
That's right.
Because then you'll not only appear to be rehearsed, you will be rehearsed.
That's right.
And then I think the other thing that is very valuable is giving people the opportunity to talk for a few minutes uninterrupted. Because I think a natural conversation, regrettably, too often we're thinking about what we're going to ask or what we're going to say rather than what the person is actually saying.
Yeah.
And I think it's hugely valuable to give people a few minutes to actually speak and hear what they have to say, because people want to be heard and they want to get their message across. And the vast majority of time, people don't get a couple of minutes of uninterrupted time to make their point. And we've all got a point that we want to make.
Yeah.
So what's the message that you want to give the people that are listening today?
Well, so this year, my goal is to preach about humanizing your brand. And what I mean by humanizing your brand is, if you are searching for a company and you go online and you look at their website, and the website has no human beings, right? No photos, no videos, nothing that actually tells you that there's a human behind this business. I think we need to change that. I think businesses need to put themselves out there and be authentic about it. And that is what's going to attract people to them. So I'm really trying to help my clients think about putting themselves in front of the camera and using yourself as your greatest tool to attract more clients to your business.
I think that's a great idea, and I congratulate you for that. And, it's stupid, but I really think that the NFL and Taylor Swift humanized both their brands this past year, and people, grabbed onto it because the idea of a football player and a rock star falling in love, and the challenge of how that relationship could exist with all of the media attention and travel and challenges and problems and stuff.
Yeah.
People just love the idea of this love story. And it
and people like to hear stories about people, and they want to know who they're supporting. They don't want like faceless things. They want human interaction.
It humanized football, and it humanized the music industry. I thought it was wonderful. This has been a really interesting conversation, Miranda. I really appreciate it. If people want to check out your service or your company, how do they do that?
I would say go to our website, which is theartofstorytelling.com, and you can connect with us there. I
love your idea of the art of storytelling, because I do think it's an art, and it's not practiced and rehearsed over and over again like the TED Talk, which I think has a real benefit of condensing what you want to say into 18 minutes and being able to say it with without any notes, without any PowerPoint slides and things like that. And I also don't think it is the typical 2-minute, 3-minute interview. But it sounds like you've got the secret, which is that 45-minute discussion, asking the probing questions, and then distilling it down into the few minutes. And so if you had to distill this conversation into a soundbite, what would it be?
It would be humanize your company with authentic, real, and believable storytelling.
Humanize your company with real, authentic, personal storytelling. Excellent. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
What a great conversation. And I think all of us need to think about real, authentic, personal conversations. And I love the idea of humanizing your brand. I also think, if I could add one last idea, I do think that there's a secret something, a secret message, a core message to every person, every company, every brand. And you get that through understanding some of these, listening to and answering some of these probing questions that Miranda talked about, and figuring out what that core thing is, that signature story, that thing that makes you unique, your brand unique, or your person unique, or your brand unique, or your company unique, I think is, in the end, the secret to telling a good story. Because once you become unique and you figure out what it is that makes you unique, that's what people want to hear about. I think so.
Absolutely, Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you.